Golden Black Live, segment 3, and remembering September 11th as well. And I remember as we talked to Stacy and Kyle off segment 1, but Brian Newbert and I were, I think, in the office together. Our offices at that time were down on 3rd Street in downtown Lafayette. And of course, that memory was Brian grew up in New Jersey and had a dad. His dad was involved on a plane at that point in time. That was a very, very strange and difficult day for everybody.
Yeah. Obviously, growing up in North Jersey, maybe this is a little more personal for me than it is for a lot of other people.
Oh, yeah,
but
absolutely.
You grow up around a place like that, and I mean, it's just absolutely iconic. And it not only is it part of the landscape of your community, your environment, but it's that pillar of strength. It's what those towers represented. And my personal experience was I was in bed. My mother called me from Jersey to tell me a plane had hit one of the towers, and I'm like, because I assumed, like a lot of other people did, it was just a little puddle jumper crashing into a skyscraper, which is relatively common, and I don't want to say not that big a deal, but that stuff happens.
Sure.
And then, sure enough, I found out later it was a 747 or whatever type of airplane it was. Came in the office, obviously saw live on television the second tower get hit and go down. My father was flying out of Newark Airport that day for Washington, D.C. Obviously, one of the planes was headed to Washington, D.C. His plane was forced to land at, I believe, Reagan, and they couldn't get out of the airport in an automobile, so they had to walk across the Potomac. If I remember the story correctly, they could see the smoke coming out of the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Of course, cell phone access being what it was that day, we didn't know where my dad was well into the afternoon. So, needless to say, for our family, that was a pretty stressful day. But what we were going through obviously paled in comparison to what the whole nation was going through.
Yeah, unbelievable. And you're right about that. And you grew up in the shadow of, to some extent, of the Twin Towers. What do you when you see? And I was watching the U.S. Open a couple nights ago, and the what I call the new tower. But just to see that back up there, what that reaction for someone like you that lives so close to that, and like you said, it's just part of your life growing up in that area. How do you? I mean, what does that mean to you when you see that the new single tower that's basically built on the same area?
For me personally, the last time I was there, the tower wasn't up yet.
Yeah.
It was only going through the political machinations of what exactly they were going to do.
Right.
But for me, I think if I saw it today, it would kind of represent a little bit of a moving on, even though nobody's ever going to move on from that. I think it's important to build that symbolism back up, just to represent that strength that those towers before, whether it be structural, whether it be economic, whether it be whatever those towers before represented. It's important to get that sort of symbolism back at the pillar of that city. And it just feels like that you have to have that constant reminder too, because you have to know, everybody has to know, no matter how old you are, our kids, their kids, whoever else has to know what happened that day, because it was such a horrible thing for our country, but such a important thing for our country. Not, the actual nuts and bolts of it, but what it represented and what our country has done from it.
Yeah. 14 years ago, and I think it's important. That's part of the reason why we're talking about it today. Is that nobody? I think just the whole September 11th, because it was called that, is you won't forget it from that standpoint. But it did affect so many people, and it affected even all of us that were living in the Midwest in those days. It's still a day that you will never forget. All right, we'll move on to, obviously, you took a look at Indiana State and as a football team, and write our previews for the site and our Golden Black Express. And do you expect much of a game tomorrow from this Indiana State team?
I think it's all on Purdue. It's all up to Purdue. I don't want to fall into the convenient, contrived storyline here, but Purdue put so much into that Marshall game. I think human nature is what it is. As we talk about a lot, especially when you deal with young people. When you put that much emphasis to a game and the game goes the way it went, not only the disappointment of the loss, but the way it was so like a few of the disappointments Purdue had last season, I think it's only human nature to let that linger. So Purdue's going to probably show a little bit about itself tomorrow in terms of its maturity, its buoyancy, how it's able to recover from disappointment and whatnot. from a matchup perspective, you always look at FCS teams and say the Big Ten team should roll over them. I don't know if Indiana State's going to be that level of rollover. If they're going to be a rollover opponent by any means, they have some good things going for them. Obviously, they're one of the better FCS teams out there. I think from a matchups perspective, though, Indiana State's deficiency defensively would seem to be against the run. Purdue's strength offensively should be against the run. So I would hope for Purdue's sake they can control the line of scrimmage up front. They can run the ball effectively the way they did at Marshall, and then perhaps once they have that established, get a little bit aggressive in the passing game. I thought they missed some opportunities in the second half when they really had Marshall by the you-know-what. When Marshall was wearing down, couldn't stop the run, was struggling to stop the run, I should say. I thought Purdue had some opportunities there. They could have gotten aggressive in the passing game, maybe put the game away. But I think that's something maybe they'll try to do from here on out when they're able to establish the run the way they had it established last week.
Yeah, and I think that's from a Purdue perspective, you have to hope that happens. A couple questions we want to answer because we haven't gotten to them. What kind of crowd do you expect tomorrow? I think if you look at Purdue's season ticket base at about 21,000 and change, and you've got Band Day and Military Day tomorrow, I believe. I would expect Purdue to announce a crowd close to 30,000 tomorrow. The weather is supposed to be cool, under 67 degrees or so tomorrow. I'm looking at my friend Cameron across the way, and he's kind of winking, saying, "Yeah, we're close." And so it is raining here in Lafayette right now, but it should be a decent day tomorrow. One of the quarterbacking situation, or not situation, but Austin Appleby and what happened in Week 1. We've got a question about how big of a lead do we need to have, being Purdue, before Blau gets some game snaps. Maybe just your assessment of what you saw from a quarterbacking perspective. Austin Appleby obviously did some good things, but the 4 picks is tough. But Darrell Hazel's not quick to throw in backup quarterbacks.
Let me say this first of all, because I think it's an important thing to mention. Purdue was a better football team on Sunday than it was at the end of last November. They were a significantly better football team, I thought, than they were last year. But they still lost, and the reason they lost, well, there are a lot of them. You can point to this, that. See, when you lose the way they lost to Marshall, it opens up dissection. There's any number of things you can take apart and say, if this doesn't happen, if this doesn't happen, if this doesn't happen, it's this guy's fault, it's that guy's fault, whatever. It doesn't matter anymore. Purdue lost the game, no going back now. But Purdue has got to have better quarterback play. We've said that last season. We said it the season before that, season before that, season before that, et cetera, et cetera. But you just cannot turn the ball over 4 times. You cannot have 14 opposing points come off your quarterback's hand. 4 interceptions, 2 of them really were kind of, they didn't impact the game probably all that much, or they were in a situation where it didn't matter all that much. The other 2 obviously changed the game, and Purdue just has to avoid those critical errors at the quarterback position that have held it back for so long.
Whenever we have,
obviously, I mean, this is just all the same stuff we've been saying for years.
Yeah.
It's got to get fixed. It's got to fix itself. Whatever.
Anytime we have Brian on too, we always get questions on recruiting, and that's what Brian does as well as anyone, and covering Purdue football and basketball recruiting. I like this one from Pete. Do A.J. Hammonds, Haas, and Biggie awe the Haitian sensation into a commitment? And Brian will say absolutely yes. No, you won't.
Well, the first of all, we should.
Who is the Haitian sensation?
That's what I was going to say. First of all, for those who don't know, we should make mention of the Haitian sensation is Schneider Gerard from Haiti. He lives in Texas now. Purdue made his Final 5. He's a 4-star, top 50 guy. Matt Painter and Jack Owens saw him yesterday. Lined up his official visit with him. It's the weekend of October 2nd. It's Purdue, Kansas, Mississippi State, Texas Tech, and Cal are his Final 5. Purdue's going to have a good chance. Purdue's going to have a real chance there because of what they have going on right now with these big men. You really hope when you get a situation like you have right now where you have guys who are going to move on to the professional level one day and are very good college players that can propagate itself. That this recruit can lead to this recruit, can lead to this recruit, can lead to those recruits. If you look at A.J. Hammonds led to Isaac Haas in some capacity. Isaac Haas and A.J. Hammonds together helped get Caleb Swanigan. Yeah. Now you hope all of them can help Purdue get that next guy. And Purdue would love for it to be Schneider Gerard, but they've got a bunch of high-end offers out there. James Banks from Georgia is another top 100 center. Cleavon Brown's a power forward from Texas in that same boat. Sagaba Konate.
Yeah, you got it.
He's in I know.
Yeah.
From high school in Pittsburgh. He's a guy with some nice offers too. Purdue's got offers out to all these guys. They're going to get official visits from all of them, I would think, and Purdue will have a good shot at getting the big guy.
And when I say when I say Brian Scott, I can't pronounce his name, so I'm assuming he has, and he does. So that's a good thing. What you look at that with respect to basketball recruiting, and obviously Purdue has 3 scholarships available. You've talked about it on the site, and if you really want to know Purdue basketball recruiting, you need to be a subscriber to our website. But is it where obviously you'd like to get another big man in this class, but there's no layup that they're going to get another one or get 2 others. It's still obviously a very much a fluid situation, you would say.
Well, when you recruit the level of player Purdue's recruiting right now, there are never any layups.
Yeah.
Purdue's on, the big men I know of that they're on are all pretty highly recruited guys who, if they don't go to Purdue, they're going to go somewhere really good. They all have very high-level offers. Purdue has Carson Edwards for its point guard spot. That was the absolute must.
Yeah.
It doesn't need anything else. It would like something. It would love to get a big man. A.J. Hammond is going to vacate a lot of minutes after this season. Somebody's going to have to step in and help play the 5. Ideally, you want to keep Caleb Swanigan at the 4. That's the plan you recruited him for. I don't think you want to go back on that. You obviously saw something in him that leads you to believe he can be a great power forward. You'd like to keep him there. You'd like to keep playing the way you've played, so you want to get some size. It would be really nice for Purdue to get a high-level center who can come in and help you right away and be there once Isaac Haas leaves. And keep in mind, too, you have to be really not worried, but it's a good problem to have. You've got guys in this big man core. You know A.J. Hammond's leaving after next year. Isaac Haas and Caleb Swanigan, you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. If Isaac Haas gets a lot better really quickly, he might not be a 4-year guy. Obviously, we've talked a long time about Caleb Swanigan, the potential he has after college. He might be a 1 or 2-year guy. I don't think he's a one and done personally, but I don't think he's that far off. It would really help Purdue to get some size this year, not only from a practicality standpoint when you look at your depth chart, but to cover you against the unknown. And there's a lot of unknown right there, too. So I think Purdue would really like to get some size. If they use the 3rd scholarship, if you can get a great wing, if you can get a great shooting guard who's dynamic, can do things off the dribble, can balance out the shooters you have now, they do that, but they don't need that. They can bank scholarships into the spring, and very few programs have benefited more from late scholarship availability the last few years than Purdue. When you look at John Octius, Johnny Hill, Caleb Swanigan, if you don't use it in the spring, then you can push it back to 2017. There's a bunch of studs Purdue's in a nice position with early in 2017. Not to say they're going to get any of them, but the last thing you want to do is have to not pursue guys because you don't have room for them.
Yeah. Going back to Andrew, one of our avid watchers, we want to make sure we clarified his question. He said, what was, with respect to David Blau getting snaps, I mean, and how far does Purdue have to be ahead? Purdue hasn't had many games, hasn't had any games really under Darrell Hazel where they've had that big of a lead that I can recall in their 4 victories. So, you would think that Blau would get some snaps if Purdue had a decided advantage in the 4th quarter, but it's really uncharted territory for Darrell Hazel in 3 years here because Purdue just hasn't had that situation where they've been that far ahead.
Not once.
Yeah, not once, right. I mean, even Southern Illinois last year was a good-sized lead, but it wasn't. Yeah. And Appleby, I believe, did get into that game late when Danny Etling had started that as well. So, yeah, it's a good question. I think that they certainly have some reason to want to play backups, but he's also, I think, they've wanted to get their quarterback as much experience as possible. I know that this will be start number 9 for Austin Appleby, but it is he's still relatively inexperienced in relative terms. All right, Brian, football recruiting. Last question. Got about 30 seconds here, or about a minute. But looking at. I know we don't know exactly who's coming in. You'll be active on the trying to figure that out. Obviously, Purdue does not bring in a lot of official visitors during the course of the season. That's not been Darrell's MO. But what do you expect to see for official visits or traffic on the sidelines over the next few weeks? The next 3 weeks as Purdue plays at home each weekend.
I would think if you're going to get guys in September, you want them in for Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
So I would expect tomorrow's game for Indiana State to be just kind of lower level local guys, maybe some underclassmen, maybe people who just want to take in a game, so to speak. I don't want to use the word riffraff. That's kind of what I call them privately. guys who are walk-on types, obviously low major guys who came to your camp in the summer and thus are on a list to come to games and whatnot. I wouldn't expect there to be much traffic tomorrow in terms of high-end guys. It's very possible some 2017s, 2018s, 2019s come through for unofficial visits tomorrow. But I would think the priority guys, Purdue wants to get in September. And it's not to say guys can't visit multiple times.
Yeah.
I would think Purdue would tee off on trying to get them to the Virginia Tech game, because part of this is you want to show off an atmosphere. And Purdue, where it is in its football history right now, doesn't often have big-time atmospheres. And there's the potential for the Virginia Tech game to have that sort of big-time atmosphere, where if a kid visits for that game, it can stick with them. It can make an impression on them.
Yeah, you have to hope if you're trying to recruit for Purdue that can happen. All right, Brian, I want to thank you for joining us for segment 3, and I want to thank all of you for being part of that. We'll be back next week. Dave Shondell will be our guest. We're working on a couple others as well for next week. Prior to the Virginia Tech game, and of course our cast of characters, meaning the staff of Gold and Black, Illustrated GoldandBlack.com, will be joining you as well. Thank you to our sponsors, XXX, on the hill but on the level of Purdue, legend since 1929, John Basham and the good folks at Basham Reynolds, Hilton Garden Inn, and State Farm agent Trent Johnson, who will be hopefully looking to avoid the raindrops as he officiates a high school game somewhere in central Indiana, I'm guessing, tonight. So thanks again so much for joining us, and thanks to Terry Kicks and Leroy Keys as well for joining our show, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week on Gold and Black Live.